Xeon Lights was the Extinction Rebellion spokesperson who was roasted by Andrew Neil for off-the-wall things that Extinction Rebellion founders had said that she agreed were wrong, but of course couldn't exactly say so on primetime television. It was one of the most shared videos on Twitter at the time. A couple of weeks ago, it was announced she had left Extinction Rebellion and was promoting nuclear power, to the disgust of at least some of her former colleagues. I thought that was interesting, and Xeon agreed to talk to me about science and evidence, her time at Extinction Rebellion, and why she concluded she had to publicly embrace nuclear power as part of a solution. Xeon, thanks so much for agreeing to do this discussion. You were a leading light in Extinction Rebellion in the UK, have caused waves in the last couple of weeks by stepping away from that and embracing the role of promoting nuclear power as part of the solution for climate change. And you've recently joined with Michael Schellenberger, who's been causing waves of his own. We will talk about all of that. But first of all, I'm interested in your journey as someone who has been on the path of a change maker for quite some time. How did you start getting interested in the first place in environmental issues? I think that started happening at a fairly early stage. How did it happen?
Yeah, I was quite young when I was learning about global warming at school. And I mean, you know, it was being taught 30 years ago. And obviously it wasn't sort of the dire scenarios that we have now, but I was quite worried. I would say actually it was almost like a kind of eco-anxiety, but there was no term for it then. You know, now it's understood that lots of children have it. But I was worried. And I lived in a very industrial city group in Birmingham. So, you know, you could kind of see the smog and see the dirt. And, you know, it's not a very green place. I don't live there anymore. No. So I sort of got into campaigning because of that initially, just sort of thinking, oh, we can solve this. You know, I'm learning about it at school. It looks completely solvable. And then obviously over the years started to see, you know what, actually we're not solving it. Actually, it's getting worse. And it was really confusing to me because I could see that there were solutions. So kind of have gone through all kinds of different solutions. So the first thing I had a daughter, and I wanted to see, you know, I had a very low carbon footprint myself, and I wanted to see how could I like lower her carbon footprint, like, you know, make sure that we're not exponentially increasing our carbon footprint. So I wrote an evidence-based book on how you do that, and it just covers things like, you know, what are your choices for what you eat, and what are your choices for how you travel, and all of those things. So it sort of put me on a journey of like, okay, what are actual really solid solutions? What does the data say? And, you know, I read hundreds of studies all referenced in that book. And then continue to talk about the issues, continue to talk about climate change. And just sort of, I did start thinking over time, you know what, this whole thing about lowering emissions through individual changes, it's not working. It's not working. We've been trying to do it for so long, and actually the emissions are going up. And I actually don't blame people. For example, I never learned to drive because I was this keen environmentalist. I don't drive. Do you know what? It's hard. When you have little children, it's really hard. So I don't blame anyone. I kind of think, yes. Well, fair enough, it's hard. Public transport doesn't always run on time. It's expensive. There's lots of reasons. So then then it came to Extinction Rebellion, and they were kind of, I saw it as giving room to talk about those issues. Let's talk about those things. So I kind of moved into Extinction Rebellion. I think that they were really good at getting certain issues on the agenda that I'd been talking about for years, but that, you know, was kind of drops in the ocean. It was nothing really. And suddenly it was everywhere, and I was asked to speak everywhere. So I thought that's great. But then I found that it's very difficult to still talk about the solutions because the organization doesn't really put itself behind any, apart from its three demands. And its third demand is actually citizen assemblies, that they want like a jury type system to decide the solutions. So then we can't, so they're not anti-nuclear, but they're not pro-nuclear. So I couldn't speak in that role about these issues. And it did come down to the Andrew Neil show when I sat there and he said, you don't have any solutions. And I felt really frustrated because I've done so much research, and I actually was already pro-nuclear at that point. I just hadn't come out. And so I was like, I can't say it. And I felt really frustrated and felt that it's time to step away because I need to be able to talk about these issues. And actually the story with Mike, or maybe you're going to ask me about this, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're cantering in about 2 minutes through the entire substance of most of what I was going to ask you about. Well, that's fine. It's good. Let's just step back a little bit because we're going to come to all of that. But so you started at a fairly early age with your first interest in the environment. You also did a website on a science theme, Science Mum from Soil to the Stars, and your TEDx speech. You did a TEDx speech which was all about looking up and seeing the night sky properly and all those sorts of things. So the science element has always also been an important part of your focus. When you first started doing that, was that going to be your public thing? This was predominantly going to be just about science?
So it became...
Or did you already have it in mind, but it was going to dovetail into the environment stuff?
It was always, both those issues were always important to me, but I hadn't really, they hadn't intersected a lot. They did, with my green parenting book, but I kind of wanted to move away from that circle of just speaking to because it's a small group, it's a niche group really, and I got really into astronomy. I bought a telescope and I saw Saturn, and it just blew my mind, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. I want to talk to people about this. And I feel it does give you a bit of kind of like a life perspective, astronomy, and yes. That I know astronauts talk about it, but obviously I'm not claiming to have their level of seeing the Earth floating in space, but it gave me a bit more perspective, where I thought, well, kind of, this is kind of like a form of nature connection, or a way of people to see, like, look, we literally have this one planet, let's look after it, so I did the TED talk, and and I set up Science Month for a bit of fun, thinking this could be a good way for people to get interested in the issues. And in its own, it's not hugely popular, and I haven't really promoted it, but it's in its own way. It ticks along, where people do sometimes send me a question. Someone sent me one the other week saying, what is the actual science on wearing masks? I'm reading everything online and I can't work it out, and I just sent a source. But sometimes people find that difficult, so I'm quite happy to take a tiny bit of time to help out, because I think it all helps, and it's really important to be evidence-based. Yes. So I kind of, and like I say, I've had all these other opinions shifting as well, like on nuclear, that kind of shifted as well, but that was not, I hadn't planned for that to be in the public arena. And the space thing is really just, I'm really passionate about it, and I love it, and I love learning about planets, and most people are, when you speak to them, most people are. So
I think it's the sort of thing that people have when they're kids. When you're a kid, dinosaurs and space are the things that make your eyes go wide, full of wonder. And then if you can hold on to it, it's a fairly rare thing. But most of us will have a nostalgic sort of, yes, we're fascinated with these things, but of course we haven't really looked at them for years and years, but we remember that sense of wonder. The more you get into campaigning, the more you're focusing on preserving all of the things that gave you that initial sense of wonder. But it's remarkable how often you find that you've drifted away from actually appreciating it. And I was interested with the Science Mum stuff that you did, really conveyed that sort of, that sense of wonder. Obviously, given the target audience it was aimed at, made perfect sense. But it's something you so rarely see in the environmentalist community. We're doing all of this stuff, presumably because we think the world is an amazing place, but it's always so negative and angry, and so little of the amazement and the wonder of what you're actually trying to preserve.
And I'm all about the celebration. And now what I'm talking about, when I talk about nuclear, I'm celebrating. I'm like, imagine if this was invented today, we have this great thing at our disposal, and I can't really impress on you. I mean, I had a similar thing, where I had lost the wonder, and most of us do. And it was really just seeing Saturn. And I've now seen Jupiter, and I've seen 4 of Jupiter's moons, and I've seen all kinds of things. But it was that first time when I took my telescope out and I saw Saturn, that something just in my brain was just like, this is so incredible. What I am seeing is so incredible. And it's not the same as seeing a picture. Lots of people are like, oh, I know what Saturn looks like. But have you seen it? It's like you're looking into the past, it's just incredible. And it's so far away. And just that one experience really just, led me onto this path of like, how do we bring that into everything? And absolutely, when I think about environmental issues, I hope to bring that in, that, it should be lots of things that we're celebrating rather than just worrying about the loss. Because actually that's not a very good motivator, I don't think, if it's making people upset or what have you.
And I think you've met Chris Hadfield, is that right? The astronaut?
Yes. Yeah,
I did the master, you see the online masterclass things probably, because they're advertised everywhere. And one of the ones is him talking about how to be an astronaut, which obviously is not probably an option for me at my age. Nevertheless, watched it, and again the sense of wonder that comes just going through all of the different practicalities of sitting in a tin can that goes into such a hostile environment, all the things that make it work, and all the narrow margins for error that there are, and all that sort of stuff. Again, it has all these parallels, because it does make you think about how fragile a balance. You look back on the Earth and you look at how fragile the atmosphere is, what a remarkable miracle it is where we are vis-a-vis us versus the sun, and how what all the things that had to be in place for the perfect conditions for us to exist and to thrive are.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Chris Hadfield, and I got everything signed when I saw him, took all my books and everything. He wrote a book, actually. He wrote a book about how to be an astronaut as well, and that's incredible. His story is incredible about, there wasn't even a space agency in Canada when he wanted to be an astronaut. He was a son of farmers. He's from a farming family, and he was just like, you know what I'll learn to be a pilot, because that's a crucial skill. So if the opportunity ever arises, I'll just move in that direction, and I'll learn Russian, and I'll learn something else, because nothing you ever learn is bad. And he's got that real wonder. I think he really comes across. And he's also got an album called Space Sessions, which is amazing. But my biggest hero is Carl Sagan.
Oh, yes.
You know who he is. He's a phenomenal science communicator, astrophysicist, and watching his show, I mean, it's all really outdated and the graphics are really old now, but it's the way that he tells the stories and the wonder, and in his books as well, in his book Cosmos, the wonder, and also this thing that he talks about, which I don't know if you've seen this, but the pale blue dot speech. I mean, if you want wonder, look that up. Yeah. If you want wonder, so he wrote it in, I can't remember the year now, 1948 maybe, but he wrote it when that first image came back that was taken by was it the Hubble telescope, and it was the first image that we'd ever had from like really, really far distance, and you could just see the Earth suspended sort of like in a sunbeam, is how he described it, and it it was a really phenomenal moment for all of humanity. And he wrote a little speech based on that, saying, everything that happens on this little pale blue dot, and that in the middle of this vast kind of emptiness, everything that happens, this is our home, and this is what we have to preserve. And it's even today, if I reread it, and I read it 100 times, and I have it on my wall as well, it still fills me with that. This is why we're all doing what we're doing.
You mentioned already the book that you did, The Ultimate Guide to Green Parenting, which stood apart in some ways from similar sort of things in the genre because of the sort of rigorous focus on the science behind the advice, if you like. I think the style was very much. And you got one on zero waste kids coming out next year. Zero waste and kids, not words that you often see together. How did the Green Parenting book come about in the first place? How did you go from an interest in this area to getting that book deal?
It was actually because I'd had my daughter, and I wanted to know what the best things were to do. And there's so much misinformation, as with everything, right? As with everything. So I started researching, and the more I researched, the more I found things that helped. And then I had parent friends in all these groups that I would go to, parenting groups, who were saying, can you send me that research? And then I'd send them the article, and they said, I can't, I'm tired, or I can't, can you explain it? And it formed out of that, because I was reading so much stuff. So I was sort of bookmarking as I was going along. And then I just pitched the idea to New Internationalists, and they said, this is a great idea. There hasn't really been a book like this before. It's evidence-based in that community. And it's interesting, actually, because that was my first foray into being a little bit controversial. I didn't even really know that I was doing it. But there's a chapter in there about vaccines. And it's the same science, it's the same scientific method, it's the same research, but people said, you're pro-vaccine, how can you be pro-vaccine? And I had hate mail, and I had people giving me bad reviews. She's paid by Big Pharma. Yeah, and it was a real shock to me, because I hadn't really come across that before.
You might as well get practice in early, mightn't you, really? Because it seems to be a standard part of doing whatever you do. Let's move on to talk about Extinction Rebellion. You know that I've been a fairly consistent critic of the organisation, always recognising that the vast majority of people in any of those sorts of movements are basically good people who just care passionately about the issue and what's to be done, and distinguishing them from some of the others and some of the founders, particularly, who maybe had more revolutionary aims in mind, shall we say. How did you first end up getting involved with Extinction Rebellion?
I went to the April Rebellion, that's what they called it, where they closed several sites around London. I went to the Waterloo. Actually,
so that was the first one.
No, they'd actually had a first one, much smaller, which was when they launched in Parliament Square. And Greta Thunberg was there, but she wasn't very well known then. So I went to the April one months later, And
Yes.
I was just blown away by the sheer number of people. Considering what they were doing, I was just blown away. And I thought, this is where I need to be. You know, this is really important. They're talking about issues that are important to me. Maybe this is going to cause change. And so I got very quickly involved with the organizers, and they'd watched my TED talk and they knew about my book. So they were like, why don't you be a spokesperson? So I did the training, and which was minimal, I have to say, but I did the training and was, ready to go because of that energy, really, that I saw. I was on Waterloo Bridge, and it was really incredible the way people work together, and also that bridge. I've been down that bridge so many times, and it is so smoggy and polluted, and it's really depressing because you look around, there's not a single tree. You just kind of think, not even one, like for the commuters or for the people who work here. And it was incredible. The air pollution went down, and it was just children playing with chalk, and it was, the atmosphere was so incredible. It really felt like this has got to be a good thing. So I jumped completely on board based on that experience.
Yes. And XR's early position, and latterly still some of the founders, some of the others, has depended very much on a catastrophist view of the science rather than the mainstream. And as someone who cares about the science, as you obviously always have, how did you see, from why you were there, how did you see the organisation's attitude to that sort of change? Did it change over time?
It's really difficult to say because it's such a huge organisation. And what I would say is that we had these discussions constantly, and we have scientists in XR who would speak up very loudly if something was said that wasn't backed by science. And I was always on that side. And that Roger's 6 billion thing, we went round and round on that for weeks, because there were people like me who said, he shouldn't have said it. Please don't do that. It makes it harder for all of us. There's no need to say it when there's actual evidence. And then there were other people who were like, wow, we found this scientist who now supports it. Look at this calculation. And I was kind of saying, that's not how science works. But at the same time, though, I respect that, we could have that debate. It wasn't like, well, you don't agree, you have to leave. I was in there because I felt like this is useful. I'm in here. So it was really unlucky that I got pegged on Andrew Neil's show, because and you can see the rabbit in the headlights moment, because I knew that I had been against it, and I knew that the kind of consensus was, we're just going to let it go. But we had asked him, don't do it again, which then actually, he didn't stick to, but we didn't know that at the time. But we had actually sort of said, all right, it's not worth having all this internal conflict. Stick to the facts, and we'll prepare documents of facts beforehand. They started doing that as a result. So they tried to do lots of things to help spokespeople, so you have things at hand and you don't accidentally say the wrong number, and et cetera, et cetera. But then obviously, that first of all, that bit me, and because I knew I couldn't defend it, and I would never defend it, and I have never defended it. But it was very difficult because I was speaking for an organisation that had decided that they could defend it.
Did you see? Because I covered that in a video at the time, mm-hmm. And I have to say, the rabbit in the headlights moment was something that I specifically commented on, and very sympathetically to you. Basically, my position was that you'd been put into an impossible position by what he and then latterly he also quoted Gail at one point as well, had things that they had said, and there was nothing that you could do except keep under control and just do your best to deflect, which is what you did. And considering the position you were in, you did brilliantly, but there was no way you were going to win in that sort of situation, because of course he's a formidable, Boris Johnson wouldn't allow himself to be interviewed by, you've done what he didn't dare to do. So if that's any consolation at all.
But afterwards, especially after that, because I was much more cross and much less forgiving of people saying these things, then we did put these kind of things in place where there was more strategy, and there was more like, these are the lines you try and stick to, not lines, but like, don't use figures outside of this range or whatever. We worked with the scientists, and that was all brilliant, and I really appreciated that, because I felt like, okay, I can go up and I can say these things, I can say this is XR's official line. But the problem was that there were still people going and misrepresenting us, and there was not, and this is a problem that, just a structural problem in XR, there's not really a way to remove people, and there's not really a way to remove it. And what we did actually distance from Roger. We put out a statement saying he doesn't speak for us, but anything he said after that was constantly portrayed as us, even though he's doing his completely own thing now. It still gets portrayed, and I feel like that actually did a lot of damage to people who are trying really hard to do good. And they were, most people in there are trying to just be honest and tell the truth, and they don't always understand the science, so sometimes they make mistakes, but they'll own that. And then there are a few people that just made it very difficult. Unfortunately, I mean, I guess you get them in every group and every organization. You get these people, but it doesn't, it matters when they're the public face. They're the ones that are in the press.
Yes, and they were founders. It's very hard to disown the people who actually set up the organization.
There are actually about 15 founders, but because they're the vocal ones, so actually, some of the others, they're great and they're much more think the way I do, but they're doing work behind the scenes. They don't want to be a public face. So actually the ones we were left with, maybe, it turned out that there were some problems. And I think they've dealt with a lot of that, but it was, one of the big things that I raised when I was there.
For you, as someone who's focused on good green parenting, I featured Rupert Reed on this channel before with his presentation to relatively young children, telling them they might not have a future. How representative of Extinction Rebellion was he on that sort of side? What was your take on the question of how people should talk, generally, how people should talk to youngsters about this issue?
Well, I've given a lot of talks to youngsters, but they're completely different. And actually, I focus a lot on how to deal with eco-anxiety, because that's a really huge issue. And I don't want that to increase. I have 2 children. I don't want them to be, in a state, anxious, worried about them. I don't want that to be, their path. So I've been really careful when I speak to children. And I actually skip over a lot of the science stuff, because I know that they know, and I know they're worried. And I go straight to action can help you, doing this can help you, feeling empowered, forming a community can help you. It doesn't have to be XR, it can be your own group where you talk about things, all of those kinds of things. And I've clashed as well with Rupert on these things. He already has quite a big profile outside of Extinction Rebellion, so he's already doing a lot of those talks anyway, and then it's now become kind of representative of XR. And as I say, there's not really a way once somebody's in the public eye and they're representing you, there's not really a way to rein them. I officially quit, but people don't tend to do that. But that's because it was really important to me that I distance, because I'm not going to go up and say nuclear is great, because I know XR doesn't stand for that, but other people have done that when they've said 6 billion or they've said we're all going to die, that, and that isn't representative. If you look at all of our strategy, it's all online. They've got tons of strategy and all the stuff that I helped to work on. That's not what it's saying. But that it's hard, because then that's how it's being represented by a handful of people, and there's a lot of good people in that organization who don't really know how to rein it in. And it's not hard. It's not easy to rein it in. Because even after Roger left, I remember Roger just wrote a Facebook post. It was nothing to do with it. It was some Facebook, and it made national news. And it was actually just his opinion, and it got portrayed as us. And it was, a lot of work to try and unpick that.
No, it's difficult. I mean, my earliest criticism of the group was the fact that leaderless organisations like this will never follow good strategy. And part of that is always that there is no such thing as a totally leaderless group anyway. And so what you end up with is informal leadership structures that tends to come around charisma and history, which of course is exactly what's happening in that case. And that means that you therefore get it without accountability. That was my earliest critique, and then I sort of learned more about Roger's strategy and the left bring the government down kind of stuff. And so, I imagine that the majority of ordinary members of XR didn't really see that at all. They just saw a climate change movement, and they understood that it had this very confrontational strategy, and they had this citizens' assembly thing, although they probably didn't absorb that it was meant to be superior to Parliament in decision making and the dynamics of what that was really about. I mean, I would talk about these things, and I would get quite a lot of people coming to the channel in those days who were saying, this isn't fair, this isn't what we see. We're in Devon, or we're in Exeter, or we're in Sheffield, or whatever, and we're just nice people trying to make a difference. I said, look, I understand, but at the end of the day, when Roger Hallam speaks, then that gets covered by the BBC, and that's where the biggest impact comes. And it's terrible for all of the good-hearted people who just want to make a difference.
It's interesting though, because when I joined, so I missed a lot of that stuff at the beginning, and I hadn't even really seen Roger's strategy. I met him once in passing in the office, you know, the people that I worked with in the media he wasn't in the media team, and the media team was actually the biggest team. So all the stuff we saw on a daily basis was not about any of that. You know, it was going out on the streets, talking to the press, you know, giving positive stuff to the press, organizing talks. I did all kinds of public speaking, and all that was really positive, and we'd get positive feedback from people. So it's almost like it was two separate things. And actually, by the time, you know, after I'd been there for a while, I said, you know what, there's a kind of conflict here, where there's this thing over here, most people aren't aware of it, or they don't want it, and then there's this what it's organically become, which is actually really great. And it did have kind of people who were more like leaders, but they weren't the power, you know, they weren't power grabbing, and you wouldn't even necessarily know who a lot of them were, because they didn't want their face on screens. But they did so much work, so much hard work, and that they were really incredible people. I loved working with them, you know. But then, you know, at some point I had to go, is this representing the organization? But it's almost like it's, you know, two organizations, and it's not really just one. It depends on where you are. And I wasn't in the action circle, which is where Roger is, you know, coming up with the big ideas, what we're going to do and all that stuff. So I never even saw, and you know, you could look it up, they're very transparent, but I wouldn't read through masses of minutes and documents really. I just worked where I worked, and where I worked was really it was really positive in a lot of ways. And we certainly weren't trying to, you know, we were actually trying to set up groups to support children if they were worried. You know, we weren't trying to maybe push the same narrative as other people. But then you know, at some point there became conflicts, and then as you say, if there's not a leader, who do you go to resolve the conflicts? So it just, to be honest, a lot of the time it just went round and round. That 6 billion thing went round, and I actually had a huge meltdown about it at some point in a WhatsApp channel, where I said, we have to make a decision on this, and then we have to leave it, because I cannot sit in another meeting about it. I don't want to hear about it anymore. And literally a few weeks later I was on that show after I'd done the internal battle, and I couldn't talk about that, and I was just like, this is really unfair.
it was so unfair.
There was a lot of pushback internally, though. There was a lot.
Yes. Did that interview make any difference? Did other people watch that interview and say, okay, this makes the point? Or did they just... I think
it did. Yeah. I mean, everybody watched it. And I think it was that thing where I said that, you know, people knew that I'm a strong interviewer. They knew that I've got tons of facts. I know lots of stuff. And I just sat there. And it was that at the beginning that just really threw me off. It just really threw me. And I kind of recovered myself at the end, where I make a little speech about the moon landings and ISS, which I believe all that stuff. And I do know lots about it. But it took me a while to recover, because in my head I was thinking, oh no, have I said something wrong? Is it going to look like I'm going against Roger? You know, like when you're speaking for the organization, I always tried to have some integrity, where I was really speaking for the organization. I could have gone on and pushed my own thing, but that's not what I wanted to do. That's not what a spokesperson should do. Unfortunately, then when people do that, there's no repercussions. There's no way of reining it in. So actually what I've said to them as well now is that you end up losing the ones with integrity who want to truly represent the movement, you know, because there's no process. And I think they're looking into it, and they'll have lots of discussions and meetings. I don't have to be there, but there was definitely a lesson taken from that, because I was very loud about it afterwards, and because they saw that I was it completely threw me off. And if there was one thing that could have done it, it really was that. It really was that.
What about the other side? Talk about younger people and how younger people feel. There's the other side to that, which of course, you know, I mean, recently the virus coverage has sort of pushed it out of the discussion, but there were quite a lot of people who were saying, should we even have kids? Which I always thought was a fairly startling thing to be asking. But given your profile as with the green parenting thing, I'm guessing that a few people have had this conversation with you, wanted to have this conversation with you. What do you say to people who are so anxious about the future that they're asking themselves that question?
I mean, I have had people even ask me for advice, people I don't know ask, and I'm not in any position to decide, you know, that's what I always say, what another parent can do. Obviously I had 2 children, and I have never regretted it. There have been times where I've been worried for their future, but I think that's normal for any parent, you know, and would have been normal for parents who lived through wars and still they had children, and you know, so I think that's just part of being a parent. But if you feel that your anxiety is so bad that you worry about your child's future all the time, then maybe it's not a good idea. But I just feel like it's really not my place. Obviously, I don't say don't have kids. That's not what that's, you know, I authored a book about this. It's not what I say. But what another thing I sometimes get is the population thing. And what I often say about that is that actually, it's, you know, if you look at research into that, and Hans Rosling did a good TED talk on it. You know, if you lift people out of poverty, actually, they naturally have fewer children. So, you know, even again, there are lots of solutions to these things. It's not just about we're just going to quit everything. It's all bad. You know, children are amazing. I love my children. You know, so I think it's about looking at where the solutions are, what we can do, where we can do them. And I think actually it's sometimes that specifically that can come down to this thing about trying to take too much responsibility. And that's kind of why I shifted away a little bit from the green parenting, because that was all about individual footprints. And I was happy doing that. And I'm happy, you know, still trying to keep a minimal footprint. But actually for a lot of people, it's just stressful and it's hard and they don't need it. And I don't think I don't think it's even necessarily the way forward. I think people will always move in the direction of progress, of things that are convenience, what's easier. So actually we just need to make those things easier so that they can live, not emit lots of emissions, and still, you know, have good quality of life, and we can still have hospitals running, and we can still have warm homes. But it's about working out, you know, exactly what the direction is, you know. And again, this comes back to nuclear, doesn't it? Because so much energy, such a little carbon footprint, you know, it makes sense.
And interestingly, I think this is where we get to the heart of the divide in some ways, because the regressive side of the vocal Extinction Rebellion side that I kicked against were those that seemed to be about, well, modern technology is basically bad and we just need to stop flying, stop eating meat, stop doing most of these things, and retreat and shelter and survive as best we can. And of course, on the other side, there's of course, the prediction was that we were all going to have starved in the 1980s because of population growth, but innovation meant that we were able to expand massively how many people could be well supported and have decent life and hopefully not trash the planet, although we need to be a lot better at that. And the question is that basically we need to innovate better and use better technology, and that's where the nuclear side comes in and some of the other things. And it seems to me that these are the two different strands. And I'm very firmly on the second one. You're obviously firmly on the second one as well. I did an article in Quillette a couple of years ago, which is very much in the spirit of Michael Schellenberger's pieces generally. I'm not saying we're totally aligned, but generally, which is that the environmentalist movement by and large had made mistakes in having knee-jerk rejections of technology, that if you're looking seriously at the mission that they say they're about, you'd think, well, why wouldn't you at least be open to this? There may be problems, so you may not embrace it without question, but why would it be beyond the pale? Why would it be off the agenda in the way that nuclear is, in the way that GM is, various of these technologies that seem to have some sort of promise? How did you get into there? Because you said you'd reached the nuclear power thing while you were still at XR, quite some time before it sort of now become part of your public profile. How did your thinking arrive there?
So my story actually around nuclear is years ago I was a member of the Green Party, and I was quite an active member, and a friend of mine had sent me, an engineer friend of mine had sent me a scientific paper on deaths from radiation, and I was really shocked that they were so low. They were just so low. And I was like, this can't be right. And you know, I started doing a bit of research, and then it sort of coincided with this. There was this local Green Party event on energy, and there were 3 panelists, and 2 were Green Party people. I think one was maybe an MP or something, and one was a scientist from the Met Office, which is just down the road here. So, so I thought, this is great. This is a good time to flesh out what's going on. What are the answers? And it was just so pro renewables, because the 2 people in the Green Party were talking quite a lot. And so I waited to the end, and I put my hand up and I said, I just have a question for the scientists. Do we need nuclear? And I was actually just asking genuinely, I wasn't trying to antagonize. It was a bit like the vaccine thing. I didn't really know it was going to all blow up. And I just asked the question. But what happened is that the host of the event didn't give him the microphone. He gave it to the other speaker, who said, "We don't need nuclear." And I was really cross, right? I was really cross because there were hundreds of people there. They should have heard his answer. And also I was a bit cross with him because I felt like, you're a scientist. You've got to step up. You've got to, they didn't forcibly stop him speaking, but he just kind of accepted that the mic didn't come his way. And afterwards, I grabbed him and I asked him the same question. He said, of course we need it. We need nuclear. And I was really frustrated because I felt like someone needs to come out and say this. And all those people didn't hear it. And I actually had one of the local, I think she was a councillor or something, come up and put her hand on my shoulder. She was really concerned. She said, "You're not pro-nuclear, are you, Zion?" And, again, before that, I hadn't really thought of it as pro or anti. And I sort of said, I'm pro-evidence, I'm pro, but it really made me think, is there some kind of groupthink conspiracy going on here where you can't even, what I didn't like is that I couldn't even discuss it, that we couldn't even discuss it. That's not healthy. I don't think that's good. And so what happened is I quit my membership that day, and I'd only ever voted Green. I'd been in the Greens for years. I quit that day and I complained. And to their credit, they took it seriously and they said that shouldn't have happened. They'd look into it and blah, blah, blah. But at that time, they were still very anti-nuclear, so I had to step away. And that was when I was like, okay, this is always going to be a thing where I kind of don't really belong anywhere because I'm in this group. And this was before I had even heard the term eco-modernist. I don't know if it was around then. But now interestingly, there's this group called Greens for Nuclear, and it's people in the Green Party who are trying to get nuclear into policy. So it shifted a lot anyway, which is great, great news. But at that time, it was just, it really propelled me into going, I don't like that kind of, we don't talk about it. We just ascribe to this, and actually I sent the paper out, the radiation paper, to all of them as well, like, have a look, but they'd just say, what about waste? And then I'd find stuff about waste. And then I just realized some people just don't want to change their minds, and that's fine, but I'm not going to be in that group anymore.
Yes, no, it's fair enough. I mean, it's interesting. I did a video a while ago on the potential of fourth generation nuclear, because I think it was sparked by watching the Netflix series on Bill Gates, and fourth generation nuclear was one of the projects that he was interested in amongst dozens of others. And something that he said that really struck home to me, he said, here's a technology that basically has stood still for decades because of the various politics and the issues with it, whereas every other technology with 3 decades worth of innovation would have transformed from where it had been. And obviously so many possibilities in the fourth generation technology we're looking at, which would resolve a lot of the waste issues, would resolve safety issues, when Rupert Read goes on about how you can't have these things because for some reason everyone's going to disappear because of climate change and then they'll melt down, or whatever it is he imagines is going to lead to that. That wouldn't happen because they would naturally shut themselves down.
The thing with the potential is, I saw this with renewables. 15 years ago, I was campaigning for renewables, and what we said was, this battery storage is around the corner. It's going to revolutionize everything. And people still say that now. And I'm like, it's been 15 years. It's not around the corner. And we need solutions now. We have solutions now. We have nuclear tech that works great now. Yes, there have been some issues. But if you look at the death rates compared to from the fossil fuel industry, it's still the better option. It's just that there's a lot more fear connected to it. If you look at air pollution, if you look at rising emissions, there's just no contest. And even from the blasts themselves, I think Chernobyl killed 12 people. Fukushima didn't kill anyone from radiation. It was all in the kind of ensuing panic that 575 people died. I really think it would be great if we had some incredible, I hear a lot of this Rolls-Royce technology, and it looks great, but until it actually exists and we can build it, I think we have to be careful that we don't become this, it's around the corner, because then we're not building what we have now. In fact, it's not even about building things now. I'm saying we should be building Sizewell here in Britain, but we're closed. Europe's closing plants. Germany closed its power plants and had to start burning coal to meet the demand. France has now started. There's a strong anti-nuclear sentiment there, and Greenpeace are very active there as well. Yes. And they've closed Fessenheim that still had years left in it. It had years. Yes. It's irresponsible. Where are they going to get their energy from? And this is something that I think really, I was really pleased to see that there was a group. Did you see the group that went out and protested outside of Greenpeace headquarters in France?
Yes.
Right after
yes.
they closed Fessenheim. So I think that's really, that we need that shift to happen. We need people to understand that we have a great, safe, workable, yes, there could be issues, but that's true of all of the industry, all of the energy industry. There can be issues. Nothing is 100% foolproof safe. Right. And I've heard Rupert's argument, and I've heard it, what if there's a, tsunami? Yes, there was the tsunami killed over 15,000 people, though, for context, for Fukushima. What if there's a tsunami? He said, what if there are rising sea levels? If there are rising sea levels right next to a nuclear plant, we just decommission it. Like, it's not it's not that complicated. We just got to be smart about it. And then I've heard people say we're not smart enough to use this technology. That's like saying we're not smart enough to be allowed to live. What is that saying, really? I don't think that's the right thing to say.
No, and it's interesting because I looked at the Committee on Climate Change detailed technical report on how we would get to net zero by 2050, and of course, lurking in there is the expectation that nuclear has a role, at least 3 more nuclear power stations. And there wasn't much discussion or acknowledgement of that, but it's there. And obviously the Conservative government has signed up to that, and Labour were certainly not ruling out that nuclear was going to be required in the last election. But then you've got the environmental campaign groups, the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats, I think, in the last election, with this line that no, you can do it with 100% renewable, which is a variable source of energy. And everything I'd seen suggests that you'd have to make major changes to be able to cope with 60 to 70% variable energy sources. And 100% is just wacky. Because
it's dangerous. You have to think as well, what happens if it cuts out and the hospitals aren't running? People can't imagine because they're used to things just running. But actually, that's the reality. That's why we need nuclear, even if just as a baseline. But also, it's that argument is based on reduction of people's own energy use. And as I've said, this is something that hasn't changed. It's actually gone up. Despite all the behavioral science that's been done, how do we get people to change their footprint? Despite all my work, despite everything, it has gone up. And I just think that is not going to change, unless you're saying we should have some kind of authoritarian rule where we tell people, which I don't think is right, you can only use this much today. Why would we do that when we have a clean energy option? It just doesn't make sense.
Yes. But you see, I always saw that the logical outcome of the XR position was authoritarianism. I'm sure that wasn't what people told themselves. But when you saw Gail in the House of Commons committee saying, well, remember the war spirit, people went for rationing and it was fine. The logical position was always, well, if it's about nobody flying and people not eating meat and so on, then ultimately people aren't going to choose to do that. People aren't going to vote for it even, never mind anything else. So how on earth do you actually think that comes about unless you're going for an authoritarian model? Well, and the Citizens' Assembly thing was, as far as I was concerned, a red herring, because the Citizens' Assembly was like, oh, well, if citizens sit down and come up with it, then people will accept it. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I think the Citizens' Assembly thing has a lot of, it's very idealistic, but, because of that, there's a lot of beautiful energy behind it where people are like, how do we be more democratic? And, the intentions are really good, but it's very idealistic. I don't see it happening. And even if it did happen, we need solutions right now. We don't have 20 years for people to sit and deliberate, if we get this system, to then sit and deliberate, oh, maybe we should have a nuclear power plant or we shouldn't. What I liked about the Citizens' Assemblies was that they said people would listen to the experts, so they would have to be informed by science. I like that aspect, is that, whether or not they would listen, they might not, they might still come away, I'm afraid of nuclear or whatever, but I thought that's not the worst thing, because actually you find a lot of politicians don't have any science background. A lot of people aren't science literate, and that can be a problem as well, because they then end up with the same kind of prejudices, and there's no way of really, there's not really a way of tackling it. So I like that idea, but I think, I know Gail quite well, and I would say she's not at all for authoritarian rule, but it's just, I completely see that it comes across that way from things that have been said. But again, I don't know how to describe it other than kind of like really over idealistic thinking, where they just think if people really understand, they'll make the changes. They don't think it has to be top down. They think they'll really, and I'm saying, but lots of people do understand it's hard to make changes, it's expensive to make changes, and it's just not going to happen. And it's not happened. I was campaigning for that when I was really little, and now I'm in my mid-30s. I can go, that's not going to happen. That didn't work. There's no magic solution. I've seen all these behavioral studies. How do you get people to switch off their lights and turn off their taps? Yes, we've done those things. How much energy has that really saved? We're talking about so much energy. They're talking about so much. And the Green Party had a report, didn't they? They had a zero carbon report. And I actually went to the event where they launched it with Caroline Lucas on the panel because I was interested in this report. And it was all about how we could meet our energy needs with renewables. But the tiny, tiny small print at the bottom, tiny little small print, this only works if we have a 40% reduction of energy use. Where's that going to come from? Where's it going to come from? But you'll find most people there were like, this is great, looking at it, not seeing that little small print. And I put my hat again, always the antagonist, said, how do you expect this to happen? We just have to find a way. But behavioral scientists haven't found a way. Psychologists haven't found a way. Society hasn't found a way. So actually, that's not the way that humanity is going. And let's be honest, it's like with vaccines. People can have the little pockets of, I don't want vaccines over here, but other countries are crying out for them. They want progress. That's what people want, and they want to live in nice homes. Of course they do.
Yes.
We have it.
Yes.
We have it. It's all very well for us to say they can't have nuclear and build their own stuff, but and that's actually what a lot of what Mike's arguing in his book, that he's getting a lot of flack for. But if you really look at the arguments, it's essentially what he's saying is we can't just tell them they can't develop because we did this, but we can try and find better ways so that it doesn't continue to pump emissions into the atmosphere.
Yes, and that's the thing, isn't it? If you can find better ways, then it becomes everyone's interest to use those better ways. So if it's not that way, I can't see how it is, because I've never seen someone be elected on the principle of promising something less good than what people currently have. And people don't think in terms of these system questions. They just say, well, no, we've got to do it now, we've got to do it now. Yeah, that's all very well and good, but either you've got to persuade all sides of the political divide so it becomes a consensus issue and they just debate how, or you've got to come up with some innovations that happen on the ground that then become so desirable that everyone will want them. Elon Musk approach, I suppose. And if you don't have those things, then what do you have? And we'll say, well, we don't have time for those things. I say, well, you sure as heck don't have time to argue until you're blue in the face, and it doesn't happen anyway, which seems to be the alternatives. I mean, am I wrong here?
Everybody wants clean, efficient energy. Everybody wants abundant energy, and we have a perfectly viable option that people have become afraid of, and it's become very polarized as well, which is interesting, and I don't know where that's come from. And I don't know why, especially when you think that the really far left, like communists, they really embraced nuclear, right? Because it gave them energy independence and free, cheap energy. So I don't know where that's come from. And I'm hoping to try and help shift that through having conversations and, getting people to read upon the science. And I feel like there is some shift, as I say, like in the Green Party, that really surprised me. I mean, I don't know if anything will actually change, but people are being openly vocal in there and it's being accepted, and that's a good start to the discussion, because they are strong. They have previously been strong opponents, so maybe even some of them are realizing, look, actually renewables isn't doing it, it's not going to meet our entire demand.
Yes. So you split from XR and you've joined now with Michael Schoenberger's operation. Tell me about how that came about.
So Michael wrote a damning article about me, and he had Bill McKibben in it and AOC and Greta Thunberg, and it said, the title was something like, why everything they tell you is wrong about the environment. And I looked at it, I was sent it that morning by so many people, you're in this article, and I had to look at it, and I said, I didn't disagree with everything that he was saying, but I was like, well, I think he's misinterpreting me on one of the points that he's raised, so I'm going to message him. So I sent him a DM on Twitter. He said, do you want to talk? And I thought, it's going to be a really hard, battle. But actually, we ended up chatting. We had quite a lot in common. And he did fire lots of questions at me about XR, which are quite a bit of it's quoted in the book now. And he said, I'm recording this, I'm going to use it in my book. I thought, well, fair enough. Had an honest discussion with him. And then, I went away and I thought, I'm going to look up some of the stuff about this guy. I hadn't really heard of him before. And watched his TED talk on nuclear, and I was like, this is fantastic. And it has had millions of views because it's fantastic.
Yes.
But I was like, I already know this, but this is such a good explainer. I'm going to use this and show people. So the next time I spoke to him, I said, you know what, you and I think I said something like, we're the same, we're pro-nuclear. And he was just gobsmacked. And we had a discussion about it. And then months later, then we had no contact at all. Months later, he sent me an email saying, do you want to talk? I thought, I don't know what that's about. Just arrange it. Spoke to him. And he said, well, would you be on record pro-nuclear? He said, would you be on record, because we're writing this open letter to the government. We need people to sign it. Would you be on record? And I said, you know what? Yeah, I've pretty much stepped away from XR anyway. That was kind of the slow process of stepping away. And I feel like it's time to talk about solutions. And this is probably the most important ones, particularly because people don't get behind it. So you think the rewilding gets lots of people behind it, planting trees, lots of popular things. Renewables has lots of proponents. Nuclear, not enough. And so I said, actually, yeah, go on then. And then he was kind of like, wow, this is going to be a huge deal, and you're going to get, slaughtered, and it will be good, but there will be lots of bad in it, and moving forward, what should we do? And then that turned into a discussion about, well, what about opening a chapter of environmental progress in the UK, because there's a lot of potential here,
for sure,
and that's already going amazingly. So that's kind of how it came about.
And did that prediction come true? Have you had lots of kickback?
Do you know what? Actually, not a huge amount. Like, there has been some, of course, but I would say mostly I've had a lot of positive from all sides, like all kinds of people, and some of it's just been just pure fan mail, and I don't really know why somebody took 10 minutes to write me this, I'm reading it scouring, is there an interview in here or something, and it's just literally like, you're great, I love what you're doing, keep it up. And so I was like, well, you know what, actually nuclear is more popular than we think, because that's most of what I've been getting. And interestingly, quite a few people that I worked with in Extinction Rebellion, they're not saying it publicly, but they've either said, can you send me more information? I'm interested. Or they said, actually, I agree with you, but they're just not doing it publicly. But I'm hoping that they will begin to. I'm hoping that they will, because it really, helps other people to open their eyes to the evidence if they see that someone they trust has done it,
I do think that there's an appetite for at least something that sits in the middle of the extremes, and no doubt we'll get some things wrong and we'll develop some degree of tribalism, but tries at least to follow the evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite exciting, really. And some of them are really notable people, and some of them are completely new. And actually, interestingly, I think a lot of younger people in their kind of 20s, mid-20s, a few of them have been like, I didn't know that being anti-nuclear was a thing. It makes sense, so there's that shift happening as well, that I think actually in a lot of older generations there's that fear, because it's linked to weapons and all kinds of other things that maybe people grew up with, fear of so yeah, I'd say there's a definite shift happening. How to harness that and bring people together will be interesting. We are helping to run the Stand Up for Nuclear events. I don't know if you know about those. They happen in September around the world. And it's just a chance to get lots of people together to discuss the different issues and things. So maybe that will be a kind of focal point in some ways for people to come out and support and join.
And you recently completed an MSc in science communication, I think. So in many ways, that's sort of setting you up for your task for the next few years.
I mean, that was imperative after I had that thing with the anti-vaxxers, and I didn't know how to speak to them, and I didn't know where it was coming from. And I was sending evidence, but it's, as you say, facts don't tend to change people's minds. That's not what works. But communicator trust is really important. The way you communicate, whether or not they trust you is a really huge, it's not just about throwing data at them. And so I wanted to learn some of those skills. And I did learn a lot on that MSc. It's invaluable, actually.
And what's your take been on how science has been communicated through the whole pandemic thing that we've just been sitting through? Because it's in many ways been a parallel universe to what we've been talking about.
It's been all over the place. I mean, I struggled to follow some of the guidance, to really decipher what it meant. So I'm not surprised that most people had no clue, but I still think actually people have behaved pretty well. They've mostly still tried to keep to the guidelines. They've mostly tried to, socially distance and all of that stuff. And most of the people I know were not seeing people or were not leaving the house unless it was essential. So people kind of got on board with it anyway, I think, even though it was
Yeah.
very muddled in it. Yeah. And I don't know if that's just really, again, these people that are making the decisions, they just don't have a level of science literacy where they really understood like
Yes.
how it could be communicated in a really clear way. But it wasn't at all. And the mask wearing is still ongoing, because a lot of other places are wearing them, and who's recommended them for a long time, and we're still kind of, you wear them here but not there, and again it confuses people. What kind of mask? Nobody knows.
And it's become a political thing in America. I mean, how mask wearing gets political, I have no idea, but no doubt some people will be telling me in the comments to this video. Have you had any sort of feel for, one of the things that struck me was almost throughout, but certainly in the early stages, the government was all saying, we're following the science, and they would do these releases with scientists flanking them and all this kind of thing. And it's starting to get a sense towards the end that maybe this hasn't been a good idea, but it's been so stringently following the science, in that there are trade-offs, and these are political decisions at the end of the day, because we don't know how damaging the lockdown is going to play out to be over the next year. And simply doing what epidemiologists said wasn't necessarily the whole of what needed to happen in that situation. And there might even be parallels with that with the climate change set off, because knowing how the atmosphere works isn't the same as knowing the psychology of societies and human beings, and therefore what you can do and how you can work. If you're fixated on the one to the exclusion of the other, you're not going to come up with something that works. Do you have any sort of sense of that from what you've been seeing?
It's really interesting, actually, because before we went into lockdown, South Korea went through the same kind of coronavirus rippling through their country, and we didn't know a lot about it then. We didn't know a lot about how it spread, and every country was trying to deal with it differently. But it was really interesting how they dealt with it, and that they didn't actually fully lock down. They did massive, from the beginning, they did mass track and testing, so that the people who came into contact did have to go and lock down for 14 days. And quarantine, and everybody else just carried on as usual, and they had really minimal deaths, and they managed it really well. I thought that was a great case study quite early. I know you could say in the different social norms and things, but we didn't really attempt anything like that. And actually it could have, in some ways, I think, the lockdown on mental health and stuff has been really difficult for a lot of people. So maybe it could have been useful if there'd been more testing, then people could have,
yes,
it could have been done differently.
I mean, I think they probably benefited because they'd had SARS before, which was a similar sort of disease, whereas we were thinking flu. And
we're completely unprepared.
And thank goodness in some ways that, because that means that we haven't had so many problems, but it would have been, I'm sure there would have been a more optimal way to respond. Final question, Ben. As you are looking forward to the work that you're doing on all this and the situation that we're in worldwide, what gives you cause for optimism? What is it that you think we have to look forward to, or that is worth fighting for?
I mean, I think humanity's worth fighting for. I think as we were saying, it's that wonder of what an incredible place, what an incredible planet we live on. This is the only known habitable planet in the universe. It's phenomenal that we're even here. The chance that, the likelihood that you and I would even be here, let alone the evolution of mankind, is just incredible. There's so much to celebrate. And I think, it is about just remembering that wonder. And I would urge everybody to go and read the little speech that Carl Sagan wrote called Pale Blue Dot, because it never fails to bring that to light for me. But that's what keeps me going, whether it's fighting for, the nuclear, or like thinking about climate change. There's always lots of negatives with everything, but it's very much about just what's the best that could come out of this. We could have a clean slate. We can have infinite clean energy and no rising emissions. Wouldn't that be an incredible future to give to our children? Yes, we lost lots of species and it's sad, but you know what? Maybe we can bring some of those species back. It's happened before. There could be some kind of balance. I really think it is possible, and that human ingenuity can achieve it. We just have to work together on it.
Zian, I'll include a link to the Carl Sagan piece in the video description. And if people want to track you down on social media, where could they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ziontree, ZIONTREE. That's pretty much where I function with social media.
Brilliant. Zion, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for making the time. I know it's been a crazy couple of weeks, so I really do appreciate that you made the slot available. Fantastic discussion. I've really enjoyed it, and good luck with your work going forward.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.